Good. Welcome everyone. My name is Aditya. I'm the Director of Business Development here at JHU CBID. I'm also responsible for managing our corporate partnerships, marketing, recruiting talent, and also placing students in various different jobs. I've been at CBID since its inception, and I've also held various responsibilities here within bioengineering and other departments here at Hopkins, including the Brain Science Institute and the Johns Hopkins Tech Ventures.
So Aditya will be your primary ally within CBID, and if you're ever feeling down, he'll be the one to get you motivated and back up. My name is Kunal Parish. I'm a faculty member here at Hopkins in ophthalmology and biomedical engineering. I did my PhD in biomedical engineering here at Hopkins in nanomedicine and medical devices, and joined the CBID faculty in 2017. About half of my work focuses on the global health side and about how do we eliminate avoidable blindness, leveraging new technologies. And the other part of my work is focused on translational nanotechnology, how do we develop new biomaterials and drug delivery systems, ranging from ophthalmology to chronic pain and mental health applications. So today we'll start and we'll tell you a little bit about the CBID program. If you have questions throughout the session, feel free to add questions into the chat, and Aditya and Anders will do their best to respond. At the end, we'll have a little bit more time for questions, and Anders will also share a little bit about the work that he has done within CBID, so you get a flavor of the kind of projects and the kind of opportunities that you'll have here. So just to get started, I think the most important thing is to understand the mission of CBID, and the primary mission is really to develop all of you, to develop folks that come in that have an intrinsic want to innovate and have an impact in healthcare. How do we help you develop as innovators, as healthcare leaders? And then two, while we're doing so, develop incredible solutions that can have a transformative impact on healthcare, both in the US and around the world. And I would say that foremost, design is the last word in CBID, the Center for Bioengineering, Innovation, and Design, but it's probably the place where we start, and it's probably the most important part of our process. And so, design is present in every aspect of our lives. You can think about how you design a graduate program. You can think about how you design a medical device. You can think about how you design many of the tools that you use maybe in your daily life in your kitchen. And so, when we think of design, we often think about how nice something looks. But design is also an important part of its functionality. And so, oftentimes we think of, these are beautiful designs, but you can easily see some of the flaws with the designs that are here. For example, on the left-hand side, it's pretty easy to just put your hand through and open that door. On the right-hand side, I'm amazed that this picture exists and that this lady is actually as happy as she seems. Or if you want to signal that there's a fire, you have to get stuck there where the fire is, sensibly. And so, of course, as we think about healthcare and healthcare today, both in the US and around the world, poor design is not just something that you laugh about, but poor design is also something that can have a big impact on human health. And that can, of course, lead to morbidity and, of course, mortality as well. And so as we think about what we do at CBID, we're really thinking about how do we design the healthcare system, and specifically healthcare technology, so that we can improve healthcare. And when you think about poor design, of course, it's not just how it looks, but right? Is it functional? Is it effective? Is it something that can be built? What are all of the things that are important for something to actually be adopted, for it to be implemented, and for it to have a functional benefit that's better than what the current standard is today? And so as an example, you can think about, these sorts of surgeries, for example, let's say you have stones in your gallbladder. These are things that many years ago, decades ago, that would have required, open surgery. Today, with the design of new instruments like you see here, and you may see that some of these things are actually, you may think of as very minor innovations, but collectively these innovations have turned this into a very simple procedure with great outcomes and fast recovery, and where you can barely tell that this person even had a procedure in the first place. And so, of course, as we think about design and healthcare designers specifically, there's a lot of different ways that we can move the needle. And so that can be in terms of improving healthcare outcomes, making procedures easier, simpler, lower cost, reducing the number of people that are involved, shifting things to a lower care setting. There are many different verticals upon which we can innovate and all benefit from better design. Interestingly, one thing I really appreciate is that the technologies, the innovations that will innovate across multiple of these endpoints are going to be the ones that are successful at the end of the day. So if you can both improve outcomes, if you can lower costs, you make things easier to do, those are going to be the solutions that are more innovative, that are more likely to be adopted and more likely to be retained and do well in industry and in healthcare for a long time. And so, of course, before you start to think about how do I design something that is the optimal design, or design something that can be adopted, that can be utilized, that can actually improve care, first you have to understand the need. And really understanding the need comes from curiosity, comes from a compassion, and a willingness to understand the challenges that stakeholders face and deeply understand those challenges. And so this is really where every CBID project, everything that we do in CBID starts with this. It's really with compassion, curiosity. How can we deeply understand unmet needs? And discussing with these stakeholders, what are the challenges they have, putting ourselves in their shoes and really trying to deeply understand those challenges so that we can think about how to design better solutions. But when you think about designing better solutions, there's a myriad of questions that you have to ask yourself, and a myriad of questions that you have to answer before you can ever consider a world where your innovation, your design can actually have a real impact, can actually be translated to the bedside. It can actually have an impact on patients, on caregivers, on healthcare providers themselves. So, how do you actually know that your solution will be affordable? How do you actually make it safe and effective? How do you know that somebody will buy it? How do you know that you can make it at a cost that will provide a price point that someone can afford? How do you know that someone will actually be able to use it, learn how to use it, that someone will be able to repair it when there's an issue inevitably? And so, the challenge when you think about starting with a new healthcare paradigm, a new healthcare project, a new healthcare need, is that there's so many different stakeholders and so many different considerations that go into addressing that need, developing an appropriate solution, designing a business model, a regulatory path, a care model that fits into. These are all, a number of important, weighty decisions and considerations all the way throughout your development process and beyond. And so how do we start to think through these? This really gets into the CBID process, which I think is very unique and is something that will give you the best chance of being successful in terms of developing a new solution and ensuring that it's something that can actually get to patients and have an impact at the end of the day. And so the traditional approach, and still this happens all the time today, was we've had a company or there's a lab at a university and we'll spend 10 years and $10 million. We'll develop a solution. After we develop that solution, then we'll go and ask, does anyone want this? Is there a clinical need that we could solve with this? Would somebody be willing to pay for this? What would they be willing to pay? Do we have the resources, the competency to actually get it to that stage in the first place? And as you might imagine, there's lots of challenges there. There's things that you would only learn after you start to ask those questions that you'd wish you knew those answers when you first started developing your solution, right? So if we're going to develop something and now we have a solution that can solve this problem, but if we wait till the end to realize that people will only pay $40 for it, for our solution itself costs $100 to make, that would be a great thing to understand at the beginning of our process. And so you need a cyclical approach where you're understanding all of the considerations, all the constraints from these different stakeholders that are required for you to develop and translate a successful solution. And so, of course, the challenge is you can go in one direction, you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money, and more so than the money is really your time. You can spend 10 years, 20 years working on a new technology and a device. And if you haven't thought through all those considerations, those market considerations, the clinical considerations, your own strategic considerations, and of course the technical considerations, you're not going to get that time back. And certainly investors who ever fund that, they're not going to get that money back. And so, at the very beginning, it doesn't cost a lot of money, but as you start to go further and further, it's a bigger investment of both time and money. And so the approach within CBID is to take this, what we call the spiral innovation model, and that the need can come from any of these areas. There can be a clinical need to solve a healthcare problem. There can be a commercial opportunity. If we solve, this healthcare problem, we would be able to generate this amount of revenue. We'd be able to grow our company. There's oftentimes a technical challenge, right? Like we need to develop sutures that don't have bacteria attached to them, for example. Or it can be organizational strategic. Hey, we want to have a big impact in eliminating avoidable blindness. And then you can start to go through the process. But the idea is that you never go too far in one direction before you start to touch base and consider all the other things that you need to understand in all of the other quadrants here. And the goal is not that you have one solution, you keep validating and validating it.
Like I saw.
Please keep yourself muted and we'll kind of try to go along. Of course, if you have questions, you can feel free to add things into the chat to respond as quickly as possible as well. But essentially the goal and the approach that CBID takes is that you don't want to go too far in any one direction before you start to think about the other ones. And in an ideal world, the goal is that you're iterating as often as possible and continually keeping in mind the considerations of each of these quadrants and the stakeholders in each of those quadrants as you go along, so that you can pivot, you can de-risk, you can kill something as often as you need to, so that you can iteratively get to the best possible solution that meets the needs of each of the stakeholders listed here. And of course, a big piece of doing that is, okay, now we have an unmet need. We're going to start developing a solution. As you start developing that solution, you're going to have more questions about that unmet need. How do we solve it? What are the qualities of a solution that can address that need, both from a technical perspective, but also from a commercial perspective? And so you've got to keep going back to these stakeholders to really make sure that we understand that problem fully, that we ask the questions that we didn't even know to ask the first time that we met with them. And so this is something that we do quite a bit at CBID, and oftentimes this is an example of a hackathon. When there are major health issues, major global challenges, often we'll have a healthcare hackathon where we'll bring together all sorts of experts, students, faculty, industrial professionals, and we'll do this in the span of a week. If you join CBID, you'll get to do this in the span of a whole academic year. But essentially our goal in either of these situations is to make sure that we're iterating quickly through all of those stakeholders to make sure there's a meaningful unmet need, that we have a technology solution that can address that unmet need, but also that meets the needs of all of those stakeholders involved for it to ultimately be translated, adopted, and utilized. What's very unique about the CBID program is that we're not just focused on ORs and clinics and private practices in the United States or in developed healthcare settings, but that we're also very focused on how can we improve the standard of care and how can we develop transformative innovations for lower resource settings as well. And so every CBID student would join our program. They'd be paired up with other CBID students who might be engineers, might be clinicians, might be residents, might be designers. We try to develop and put together very complementary, diverse, multidisciplinary teams. And each team, each year, will focus on a need in an advanced health setting, but then also in a low resource setting, where, of course, the considerations on all of those quadrants may be very different. But also what we found is that, if you're able to develop things that can be transformative, low cost, easy to use, simple, which you may design for a low resource setting, those are things that could also be disruptive in advanced health settings as well. So through this process, it's one that we validated. It's one that many major folks in industry are now starting to adopt, this sort of a spiral innovation model to make sure we're de-risking things as we go along the process. We're not waiting to ask these questions all the way until the end of the process. And so I think we have about 14 or 15 spinouts that have already come out of CBID. There's 8 of these technologies that are already on the market. A few of these companies have already been acquired just within the last 10 years. You can see some of the news here. And so these are technologies that are now on the market, actually having an impact in clinical care. And this ranges from medical devices to pharmaceuticals and even to digital health, a wide range of technologies. And in many cases, the students didn't have a specific skill set in any of those things, whether it was medical devices or this type of approach or digital health. It's really that they focus on deeply understanding the need, with the assumption that if we deeply understand the need, we can come up with the right solution to meet the needs of all those stakeholders, and we'll find a way to develop that and to be able to translate that down the line. The core part of your CBID journey is really your design team. And so that includes, as I mentioned, about 4 to 5 students. And these are traditionally very diverse, multidisciplinary teams, and almost every one of them now has a medical student or a resident or a surgeon who's a part of the team. And so you have that kind of in-depth clinical expertise as well. But you also have clinicians who are faculty and as well as engineers and other faculty that will all be supportive of you. And the goal is that we travel this journey together, which isn't an easy one, right? To be able to make sure that you have both the competency to understand the considerations from all of these quadrants and interpret those things appropriately, but then also to be able to develop solutions, to be able to evaluate the market opportunity, to develop financial projections, to understand what might be viable from a commercial perspective. And so these are all things that you'll have your core design team that'll walk along this journey with you, and we'll just keep walking in circles together until we find something that can have a meaningful impact on human health. So this is our team. One thing, I spent a lot of time today talking about design. Everything is design, right? And whether it's accidentally or intentionally, if you think about a master's program, oftentimes they're designed to generate revenue for a university. I think that our program is designed very differently. Our program is really designed around those two outcomes that I mentioned at the very beginning, is that we develop the next generation of healthcare innovators and leaders, and that we develop products that can have a big impact on human health in the US and abroad. And so really everyone here is here to serve you and to help achieve those two goals. We see, in addition to kind of the core faculty, the fellows, the mentors that you'll have, we also have a clinical advisory board from pretty much every department within the hospital here at Hopkins, which of course is one of the most renowned and well-known and high-achieving hospitals both in the country and around the world. And we also have an incredible external advisory board. Example here is FOS, and so this consists of investors, successful entrepreneurs, folks who have been prolific inventors and serial inventors and entrepreneurs. And so once you become a part of the CBID program, the staff, the faculty, the other students, the clinical advisors, these sort of commercial advisors, they're all here to support you. That's their only goal, is to make sure that you have the best chance of being successful, that you have the opportunity to develop into kind of the person, leader, and technologist that you want to be. And that whatever you're working on is the best chance of actually having an impact at the end of the day. One thing that I think is really unique and beautiful about the CBID program is that we have really strong partnerships with industry. And oftentimes they'll support, they'll sponsor, they'll collaborate on projects, which is fantastic because they often have a really good understanding of where are there really unique opportunities where there's both a clinical need and a commercial opportunity. We also work with many foundations that are focused on improving global health and that support many of these projects, both in the US and abroad. And what's really unique, in my opinion, about the CBID process is that none of this is just theoretical. None of this is, we're going to, think about this unmet need. We're just going to make some CAD drawings. We're going to do some, theoretical financial projections. We're going to make up a regulatory pathway. All of this is very real. And all of this will be validated by real stakeholders. And so, for example, every year, our teams and the students will meet with the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. And so these are the folks that will be involved in providing reimbursement for your solution if you're able to bring it to market. You'll get to actually go to the FDA and actually submit a pre-submission to them. And they'll give you direct feedback on your pre-submission, on your technology, on your sort of suggested approval process and research and experiments that you'll do to be able to demonstrate the safety, efficacy of your device. And that's not just a consultant, that's the actual FDA and members of the FDA who are reviewing these sorts of submissions every day for industry, who will be reviewing what you submit to them. And so there's a very powerful opportunity that, in joining our program, you'll have every opportunity to develop something that can be meaningfully evaluated and de-risked, and then hopefully brought to market afterwards. So since the CBID program started in 2009, we've had more than 260 master's students. We have a little bit more than half of these have been projects that are focused on the US or developed markets, a little bit less than half that are global health projects. Now every year within CBID, half the projects are global health, half the projects are focused on advanced healthcare settings, and each team of students will get to have one of those. So they'll get the kind of the full experience in each setting. And of course, as a part of the global health projects, usually these teams will travel to different parts of the world so that you can actually really deeply understand the context of care and those unique challenges and really develop strong relationships with those stakeholders on the ground. Of course, every team has its own unique kind of team around them, including project mentors, which can range from people from industry, clinicians, engineers, other technologists, and faculty. Really, what I think about CBID most, and there's Anders in the background here, is that CBID is really a choose your own adventure. And so it's your opportunity to say, these are the kinds of experiences I want to have. These are the types of skills I want to develop. But also this is what I want to do afterwards. And I can't tell you enough how many folks come into CBID with, I've got this one approach, I want to go to CBID, and I want to go to industry. And then they end up being the ones that really want to start a company and don't care about, how much their salary is going to be next year. They just really care about, getting their idea to market and to helping patients. But of course, whatever path you want to take, our goal is to help you to get there, whether that's industry, whether that's, more grad school or med school, whether it's building your own startup, joining a startup, or something else. We've had many folks who've now gone to the FDA, other public policy areas as well. One unique thing that CBID has started a few years ago was that we've created this innovation fellowship, which Anders is a part of right now. And so you might think that it's difficult to do everything that I just mentioned within the scope of 1 year. And so CBID is an incredibly intense, powerful program. You'll have opportunities that very few other master students, if any other graduate students, would ever have. And the goal, again, of course, of all of that is to give you the best chance of developing something through the year that can really meet an unmet need, can really address that, and that achieves all of these other considerations for it to ultimately be implemented and adopted. And so now we have a program where students who are interested in building a company and spinning out that technology and where there's viability shown through their progress throughout the year, have the opportunity to be funded as an innovation fellow and have another year to support their development and get closer and closer to bringing that technology through proof of concept and to market. So ultimately, this has led to 14, 15 startups that have already been launched, dozens of patent applications, almost $100 million in funding, and several products that are already on the market and having an impact on patients today. And so really the goal for us, as I've mentioned, is to make sure you guys have the best experience. You guys turn into the kind of healthcare innovation leaders that will have an impact both in your time at CBID and again, year and decade after that in your own careers. And of course, we feel really grateful that to have the opportunity to bring in really impressive folks like yourselves. I think really the value of the CBID program is in the students and is in the faculty and the people that are on that core team with you that'll go through that journey together. And so I think, the other thing I'll just, mention, I'm sure Anders will speak to this, is the tribe that you build within CBID will be a very important tribe for you for the rest of your year, for your year, but then for many, decades after that. It's incredible. Yesterday I had dinner with the former CBID alum from 2012. He's now investing in many other companies that CBID startups have come out of. And so it's really amazing how this entire, group of CBID alums are now building together, funding each other, supporting each other, and finding ways to ultimately improve healthcare around the world. So I'll finish here. I personally, I've been at Hopkins since 2012. I did my PhD in biomedical engineering here. I don't plan to leave Hopkins anytime soon. It's been an incredible place where people are mission driven. They want to have an impact. They're open to new ideas. And you really have, the #1 biomedical engineering program in the United States, an incredible top 3 rated hospital in the world. And so you really have every opportunity to, both become the kind of person that you want to become, but also kind of have the impact that you want to have. And so applications for the upcoming cycle, again, for this one-year master's program, are due on January 7th. And of course, if you are excited about building a technology, bringing out a company, those are opportunities that you'll have after the CBID year as well. So I'll pause there. I think that the really exciting stuff is what Anders is going to share with you. Of course, he's an innovation fellow right now. He went through the CBID master's program last year. And so I'd love for you to hear a little bit about the work that he's doing.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Kunal. That was a great summary of all the opportunities that are afforded to you during your year at CBID. I'll just share my screen. Give me one moment. Okay, can everyone see that? We're good? Yeah. So as I mentioned, my name is Anders Sideris. I will share with you today a little bit about the startup that we're working on that has spun out of CBID. And I'd also just like to talk a little bit about my experience in general and the benefits of being a part of this ecosystem. As I said, my background is a clinical one. So I'd done 4 years of ENT surgery training in Australia. And one of the big things for me when I was practicing and training was that oftentimes I found myself asking the question, how could this be done better? And I really had a thirst for developing the skills, the technical skills, as well as the commercialization and business skills and design skills that were required to improve the standard of care that I'd been delivering to my patients. And Kunal mentioned that the teams that you fall into in CBID are very diverse in this sense. I was privileged to have a great team with significant engineering experience on top of my clinical, as well as entrepreneurial experience, which really made this year very fruitful for me. Our startup is called Somnosa. We're bringing to market the first clinically effective, non-invasive neurostimulation device for obstructive sleep apnea. This was our US project. As I mentioned, this is the sort of team that you'll be working with in CBID. So a great thing about this is that you get such diverse input from your team members when you're thinking about the clinical need, the solutions that you might develop, and how one might take that to market. I was privileged to work with engineers who had 5 years of regulatory experience, 2 startups previously founded, multiple patents filed in their names, and excellent technical skills, which made my experience, even better than I could have imagined. You will work very hard in CBID, but you will also have a lot of fun. So these are some images here of each of our team members in various settings. On the left there, that's myself trialing a new device that was coming to market at the American Academy of ENT Surgeons, as well as my co-founder Phoebe, second from the left there. Mitch, a mechanical engineer in our team, trialing a new cautery device, which highlights the great relationships that you have with industry through this program. And Shri on the right there, at a ENT residents training session at the hospital, learning about how residents train. And in addition, a great experience was through our global health project. So these are some photos from India. On the right there, that's our team who traveled to India in front of the Taj Mahal. We went to one of the leading eye care systems in the world, called Aravind, and worked on a telemedicine solution for rapidly diagnosing diseases of the anterior segment of the eye, such as cataract, which is such a pressing unmet need in that country and in many other low and middle income countries around the world. And I was privileged to be mentored by Kunal in this project. This is the sort of advisory network that you will have access to at CBID. So one of the great things, again, is with the diverse student group, everyone has their own network. And I was able to leverage my clinical network in Australia, as well as technical and business advisors both within the Johns Hopkins ecosystem, and at other leading universities around America. So we've got the chief sleep surgeon at Stanford on our board, as well as some leading clinicians in the sleep surgery space at Hopkins, and leading technical and business advisors who have taken many medical devices to market. So you're in good company when you're here. What the clinical problem that we identified during our exposure at Johns Hopkins Hospital was that of obstructive sleep apnea. So it's a disease where the airway shuts during sleep, causing episodes of suffocation. The problem that we identified was that there are a number of solutions that patients can access. However, they are notably ineffective for particular types of obstructive sleep apnea, something that I'd noticed during my clinical experience. CPAP is intolerable, surgery is invasive, and neurostimulation devices that are coming to market, although they have some effectiveness, have fallen short. And we were able to identify a small segment, well, not a small segment, a reasonably large segment of the market where patients were continuing to suffer through invasive surgery and a lack of other options. So our solution is a patent-pending neurostimulation technology, which delivers electrical stimulation to key muscles and nerve targets in the throat and palate to prevent airway collapse during sleep. It's delivered, if you can imagine something similar to a dental appliance. It's delivered in the form of a dental appliance. It stimulates these targets while the patient sleeps. It's prescribed in clinic and it's deployed at home by the patient. So we've shifted the care paradigm for a patient group that don't have any other options from invasive surgeries to the clinic and the home. And this is what's possible in 12 months. So because our team was, so strong and worked so well together, and we really had that strong support group around us, we were able to achieve a lot. So we founded our startup coming out of our master's year. We've developed a works-like alpha prototype, which we've been testing in clinic with our sleep surgery partners at Johns Hopkins. We filed a provisional patent. We were successful in business plan competitions. We've raised $130,000 in prize money and grants. We had the opportunity to sit in front of the members from the FDA in a pre-submission meeting to vet our regulatory strategy, something that I would never have thought I would have access to. We've competed in 2 incubators and accelerators and won pitch prizes as a result of those. And on the horizon, we have an animal trial, which is coming up next month, where we will test our stimulation approach in pigs. And excitingly, tomorrow we have our first patient where we will be trialing the stimulation approach in a patient in the operating room at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And we plan, with this data to raise a seed raise coming into the start of next year, and then eventually a dilutive venture capital raise in 2025 once we have enough evidence to get those investors to support us. So this just gives you an idea of what's possible within 12 months. I never imagined that I'd be able to achieve this much, work. You will work very hard and you will be very busy, but it's a great, fun, and very enriching experience. And you start as, an undergraduate engineer or a clinician or a designer or someone who's worked in industry, and you transform from this sort of single modality person with their own unique skills to having even more unique skills within multiple aspects of the medical innovation ecosystem, being technical, clinical, commercial, and other. So I really would encourage everyone to apply going forward. And this is just to demonstrate last night, this is the sort of fun thing you get to do. We were practicing the dissection in a pig in our wet lab here. So you really get hands-on with the work, and you're able to really get into the nitty-gritty of developing a medical device and doing high-level scientific work. Thanks very much for your time. Aditya or Kunal, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, so there is a bunch of questions, and again, for everyone else, please raise your hand and ask questions. I know I've been trying to answer as much as possible on the chat. So GRE is required. Again, I know that's a common question that is raised usually, and verbal and quant scores is what we look into it, okay? And then again, like every application, when we look at it very holistically. We look at the student's body of work, their grades, whether it's an undergraduate program. Then we look at statement of purpose and the body of your work, okay? And anything that can strengthen the application. Usually we are looking for students with creativity, initiative, raw intelligence, and the willingness to work, because CBID is a very intensive program. I want to make it very clearly, and Anders and Kunal can also chime in, because each student will be part of a team of 4 to 5 students, and each team will work on 2 projects, one global health project and one advanced health project. So for example, Anders was speaking about his advanced health project, but he was also working concurrently on a global health project in the ophthalmology space. And in addition to those 2 projects, each student is also taking courses to fulfill the program requirement. They're taking part in business plan competitions, design competitions, pitch presentations, etc. So just, again, I want to make sure that that's conveyed. And I think there was a question related to MD students. So for MD students, MCAT is sufficient. You don't need a GRE score. And any other questions, please raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask. This is the time for Q&A session.
Maybe I'll add one thing while we wait for some questions. It really doesn't matter what school you went to, or if you're a biomedical engineer or a mechanical engineer. What really matters is that you, 1, have a fundamental intrinsic interest in improving healthcare outcomes for people. 2, that you have a high level of curiosity, of compassion, and a bias to action, and that you feel an urgency to develop meaningful solutions. And it doesn't really matter, again, what your expertise is, if you did research, if you know a lot about ophthalmology or not. If you have those intrinsic things, then it's really just a matter of time and, the opportunity that CBID gives you. And so, let's say you don't have the expertise yet, or you may not feel like you're the right major, you went to the right school. What really matters is that you have the compassion, you have the urgency, a bias to action, and you're going to work well with others and be coachable. And give everything to, give it your all to have a big impact.
Yep. And again, like in any given year, we have students from biomedical engineering background, computer science background, electrical ECE background, mechanical engineering background, industrial designers, and of course, medical students and surgical residents. So for example, in the current class, we have 2 medical students who are transitioning between 3rd year to 4th year. And then we have 2 surgical residents. One is a ENT surgeon and another is a cardiovascular surgeon, okay? So it's a very eclectic mix of different students with different backgrounds and different experiences. So any questions? We are anything related with programs, student experience, global health travel, clinical immersion, entrepreneurship, startups that have been created, anything, please unmute yourself and ask.
I'll put my email in the chat. If any of you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. And if any of you are here at Hopkins, for example, or if you plan to visit sometime, you can always reach out to us, cbid@jhu.edu.
I'll do that too. The other thing I'll add to what Aditya said is that one of the great things about this program is it's very international as well. So a lot of the, this year, probably half of the class, I think, is from other places. So Spain, Denmark, India, Mongolia, China, Canada, last year Australia, Singapore, you name it. We've probably had it. So that's a great thing, is that you get to extend your network around the world, not just within Hopkins itself and around the United States.
I think someone raised their hand. Is it right?
Yeah.
Afina, please go ahead.
Hi, yes. I just had a question about how the projects are chosen for everyone. I know you guys mentioned that companies like sponsor this program. However, I was wondering if we could integrate some of our own ideas from our research and background into how the project is selected.
So yeah, so the way we start off is there is a rigorous process involved before even the students join the CBID program. So the faculty, we have corporate sponsors, companies like OrthoPediatrics, Medtronic, Boston Sci, BD, etc. Okay, but again, not all projects are corporate sponsored. 1 or 2 are corporate sponsor projects, and there are other 2 projects where the students can go. But again, it all starts with the clinical focus area. So every year, usually before the students come on board, we pick the 2 or 3 or sometimes usually 4 clinical areas. And then students go through some early preliminary rotations, and then they decide which clinical areas they want to focus on. And once they pick a clinical area and once they start working as a team, it is always needs that drive which project to pursue, and it's not a solution-driven approach of FINA. Does that make sense? Does it answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. So any other questions related to the global health projects or student experience or application? Please raise your hands or, type in the chat, or also again, we have put the different emails. cbid@jhu.edu email is again, when it comes in, we can connect you to students, alumni, faculty, okay? And of course, Anders and Kunal has also volunteered to answer any questions, and you can reach out to them directly also. Good. Yeah, Lauren, go ahead.
Hello. So the global project and the healthcare project that would be industry-based, I guess, those are 2 separate projects.
That's right.
And do they align with each other, or are they 2 separate, completely different topics?
Yeah. So let me answer briefly, but I'll let Anders and Kunal to chime in. So we have 2 projects going on. One is for advanced health. Okay, when we say advanced health, it's primarily projects catering to the US, European, Japanese, Australian markets, etc. Okay, and the other project, that global health project, is catered towards lower and middle income countries. So primarily in Africa or in LATAM or even in India. Okay, and China, we have projects that was targeted towards the Chinese market, etc. but these are two separate projects, Lauren. And Anders, do you want to give an example of two of your projects? You mentioned about Samnaza, but maybe you want to talk briefly about your ophthalmology project.
Yeah, sure. So, sometimes it works out that the global and the US projects are in the same area, but often not. So you do get a very diverse, set of experiences. So, for example, we worked in ENT in the US project, and then had ophthalmology as the one in India. This year, we have a team in endovascular surgery in the US, and then they're doing breast cancer care in Africa. There's an ENT team in the US, and they're doing telemedicine in India. And there's a cardiac surgery team in US, and they're doing ophthalmology in India. So it has happened in the past. I think that they've been the same field, but more often than not, it's probably not that. But it's really good because my experience as an ENT surgeon in ophthalmology was we take the eye out when it had cancer in it. And so I had no concept of the innovation opportunities in ophthalmology itself, eye sparing surgery and diagnostics. And that really opened my mind up to the other possibilities. And you sort of see the second field in a very different lens when you're in a global setting, because you're dealing with very different market and design constraints. The resource burden is very restricted in those countries, and so it forces you to innovate in a totally different way, and gives you a new skill in doing that, which I think is increasingly important in an increasingly globalized world, because these markets like India and China will become more and more relevant to the Western world and to these large companies that operate in the Western world, because the populations are growing, and they represent emerging market opportunities for yourself as an innovator and companies that work in the space.
So we have another 15 minutes again, but if you have questions, please raise your hand, or you can wrap off also. Good. So if there aren't any questions, again, please visit the website, cbid@jhu.edu, email cbid@jhu.edu. The website is cbid.bme.jhu.edu. And, again, Kunal is available, Anders is available to answer questions through email. They have typed in their email addresses, and we can connect you with the current students, alumni, other faculty here at Hopkins. But again, January 7th, 2024 is the deadline, application deadline. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions, if you have any additional questions.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Good. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
See you.
Thank you. Yeah. And please answer the survey.